From the blood-soaked fields of Scotland to the thunderous cry of freedom that echoed throughout cinematic history, Braveheart was not just a movie, it became a legendary masterpiece that left millions of viewers breathless for decades. But behind those immortal warriors were million-dollar divorces, alcoholism, career-destroying scandals, and haunting deaths that scarred their real lives forever. Nearly 30 years later, what happened to the cast of Braveheart? Who is still alive, and who has already left the final battlefield forever? Number 1. Mel Gibson as William Wallace. There are movie characters born to become symbols, and William Wallace remains the ultimate definition of immortal rebellion. When Braveheart premiered in 1995, Mel Gibson was 39 years old and not only starred in the film but also directed the entire project himself, turning this historical epic into the biggest gamble of his career. On screen, Wallace appeared as a man whose childhood was stolen by war, only to have his soul shattered again after the brutal death of Murron. From a young man seeking peace in the Scottish Highlands, Wallace slowly transformed into the fiery leader of a rebellion against England. Battles like Stirling were portrayed with shocking brutality and bloodshed, where Wallace used hatred to turn farmers into warriors. The scene of him screaming freedom before his execution became one of the most iconic moments in movie history. The role earned Mel Gibson the Academy Awards for Best Director and Best Picture, cementing him as a Hollywood legend. But in real life, Gibson's life became consumed by controversy. After his 25-year marriage to Robin Moore collapsed in 2011, he lost hundreds of millions of dollars in the divorce settlement. Alcohol-fueled scandals, anti-Semitic remarks, and abuse allegations involving former girlfriend Oksana Grigorieva nearly destroyed his career completely. From Hollywood hero, Gibson became a scandal magnet for years. Now, at age 70, he still continues making films. But the image of William Wallace remains an untouchable peak, a warrior immortalized on screen, despite the deep scars that never healed in real life. Number 2. Sophie Marceau as Princess Isabelle. Amid the mud, blood, and clashing swords of Braveheart, Princess Isabelle appeared like a rose lost in the middle of war. In 1995, Sophie Marceau was only 29 years old when she took on the role of the French princess trapped in a cold political marriage with Prince Edward. Unlike the weak female characters often seen in historical epics of that era, Sophie's Isabelle carried eyes filled with emotional conflict. At first, she was merely a woman standing behind England's throne, but the more she witnessed the cruelty of King Edward Longshanks and the fearless spirit of William Wallace, the more her heart was pulled toward the Scottish warrior. Scenes of Isabelle secretly helping Wallace, betraying the royal court, and finally breaking down in tears after hearing of his execution transformed her into one of the film's great tragic romantic symbols. Sophie Marceau did not need battle scenes to shine. With only her eyes and a fragile, rebellious energy, she created one of the most unforgettable international performances of her career. After Braveheart, Sophie remained a French cinema icon known for her mysterious beauty and rare artistic presence. However, her personal life faced many storms. Her long relationship with director Andrzej Żuławski sparked controversy because of their major age difference before ending in a painful breakup. Sophie was also constantly chased by tabloids over secretive relationships and a complicated private life. While she avoided the wild scandals of Hollywood, she still lived under the pressure of fame and the loneliness of being a European superstar. Now at age 60, Sophie Marceau still carries the same cold elegance she had decades ago, as if Princess Isabelle never truly aged, only quietly carrying the memory of a doomed romance born between war and power. Number 3. Patrick McGoohan as King Edward Longshanks. Without shouting or constantly swinging a sword, King Edward Longshanks still filled Braveheart with fear every time he appeared. In 1995, Patrick McGoohan was already 67 years old when he transformed into one of the cruelest kings ever portrayed in cinematic history. With icy eyes and a commanding voice, he turned Longshanks into the embodiment of absolute tyranny. In the film, Edward was not only William Wallace's enemy, but also a man willing to sacrifice anyone to protect the throne, even his own son. Moments where he ordered Scotland's oppression, manipulated political marriages, and calmly watched thousands die on the battlefield made audiences both hate and admire him. Patrick McGoohan portrayed the character like an aging predator no longer youthful, but still extremely dangerous. The scene where Longshanks violently throws Isabelle out after learning she is pregnant perfectly captured the character's terrifying cruelty. The performance became one of the most memorable villains of the 1990s. Off-screen. Patrick McGoohan was famously private and difficult. He had already become a television legend through The Prisoner, but frequently clashed with Hollywood because of his stubborn and intense personality. Unlike many actors of his generation, he avoided drugs and romantic scandals, living a mostly isolated life far away from the media during his final years. Yet that very isolation made him an even more mysterious artist. Patrick passed away in 2009 at the age of 80 after years of declining health. But whenever audiences revisit Braveheart, the image of that elderly king with the chilling smile still carries enormous weight, like the ghost of power itself never truly disappeared. Number 4. Catherine McCormack as Murron MacClannough. Some characters appear for only a small part of a film, yet become the soul of the entire war that follows. In Braveheart in 1995, Catherine McCormack was just 23 years old when she played Murron MacClannough, the quiet woman who forever changed William Wallace's destiny. She was not a sword-wielding warrior or a powerful princess, but simply a Scottish girl with gentle eyes living in a land crushed under English oppression. Yet her silent love story with Wallace became the emotional heart of the film. From their secret childhood meetings to their hidden midnight wedding arranged to escape the cruel prima nocta law, Murron represented the peaceful life Wallace desperately wanted. Everything was destroyed when she fought back against an English soldier attempting to assault her. The horrifying scene of Murron having her throat cut publicly in the town square became the moment Wallace transformed from a peace-loving man into a bloodthirsty rebel leader. Catherine McCormack portrayed the role with fragile tenderness, making Murron's death unforgettable despite her limited screen time. After the success of Braveheart, Catherine continued acting in British and Hollywood productions, but never truly became a commercial superstar. Unlike many stars of her era, her private life remained remarkably quiet, avoiding major addiction scandals or public affairs. However, she endured difficult emotional struggles after losing her father to cancer at a young age, something that deeply shaped her outlook on fame and life. Catherine also admitted many times that she hated Hollywood's superficial glamour and turned down major roles to protect her privacy. Now, at age 54, she still carries the timeless beauty of Murron, the woman who appeared only briefly, yet ignited an entire historical revolution. Number 5. Angus Macfadyen as Robert the Bruce. In the world of Braveheart, William Wallace was the fire of rebellion, but Robert the Bruce was the soul torn apart between loyalty and ambition. In 1995, Angus Macfadyen was 32 years old when he portrayed Scotland's most famous nobleman. Unlike Wallace, who charged forward fueled by rage, Angus's Robert the Bruce was a man trapped between political pressure and the manipulation of his sick father. Throughout the film, the character stood between two impossible choices: fight for Scotland's freedom or betray Wallace to preserve his noble status. Angus Macfadyen made Robert deeply human, hesitant, weak, yet tortured by his own cowardice. The moment he removes his mask after the Battle of Falkirk and watches Wallace's heartbreak became one of the film's most emotional scenes. Yet Robert ultimately became the man who carried Wallace's dream forward and led Scotland toward independence. After Braveheart, Angus continued acting. Though his career never exploded the way many expected, few people knew he spent years battling depression and alcoholism. The actor openly admitted that he lost direction after the overwhelming success of Braveheart and nearly disappeared from Hollywood during severe mental health struggles. Angus also endured a failed marriage that added even more chaos to his personal life. Still, he eventually returned to the role of Robert the Bruce in the 2019 film centered on the character. almost as if confronting both his past and himself. Now at age 63, Angus Macfadyen still carries the same sorrowful eyes of Robert the Bruce, an imperfect hero who became a symbol of redemption and delayed courage. Number 6. Brendan Gleeson as Hamish Campbell. If William Wallace was the heart of Scotland's rebellion, then Hamish Campbell was the iron fist always standing beside him through the fires of war. In 1995, Brendan Gleeson was already 40 years old when he appeared in Braveheart with his massive build, blazing red hair, and unforgettable wild energy. Hamish was not a nobleman and never delivered grand speeches, but every time he charged into battle, he felt like a storm made of flesh and bone. From Stirling to Falkirk, Hamish fought beside Wallace with absolute loyalty, willing to run directly into English spears without hesitation. Brendan Gleeson made the character come alive through his rough appearance and emotional depth, especially during moments when Hamish watched Scotland repeatedly betrayed by its own nobility. Audiences loved Hamish because he represented the nameless warriors who bled for freedom. After Braveheart, Brendan Gleeson gradually became one of the most respected Irish actors in Hollywood with major films like Harry Potter, Gangs of New York, and In Bruges. But behind that enormous career were years of financial struggles before fame, forcing him to work as a teacher while chasing acting opportunities. Unlike many stars of his generation, Brendan avoided addiction scandals and violent controversies, maintaining one of the rare stable private lives in Hollywood. Still, he admitted that the pressures of constant filming around the world often left him mentally exhausted from being away from his family for long periods. Now at age 71, Brendan Gleeson still carries the same powerful presence of Hamish Campbell, the loyal warrior who made Braveheart even more brutal and emotional. Number 7. James Cosmo as Campbell. It was not only kings in royal robes or young warriors who created the soul of Braveheart. Sometimes, an aging man with a gray beard and battle-worn eyes was enough to make the entire battlefield feel real. In 1995, James Cosmo was 47 years old when he portrayed Campbell Hamish's father and one of the toughest Scottish warriors in the film. From his very first appearance, Campbell carried the feeling of an older generation that had suffered under English oppression for far too long. He spoke very little, but every line carried enormous weight. During the bloody battles, Campbell stood like an unmoving stone in the middle of chaos, remaining beside Wallace even knowing death could arrive at any second. James Cosmo made the character unforgettable with his raw Scottish toughness, rough, powerful, yet deeply devoted to family. The scene where Campbell watches Hamish rush into battle feels like a father silently realizing war will eventually consume his son's entire generation. After Braveheart, James Cosmo became a familiar face in massive productions such as Game of Thrones and Troy, but his career path was never easy. Before global fame, Cosmo spent years struggling financially, accepting nearly every small role simply to survive. He also endured a failed marriage after years of career pressure and endless time away from home. While he avoided addiction and major legal scandals, James openly admitted he often battled loneliness and depression because Hollywood could be cruel toward aging actors. Now at age 78, James Cosmo continues acting with the same gravelly voice as if Campbell from Braveheart never truly left the battlefields of Scotland. Number 8. David O'Hara as Stephen of Ireland. Inside a film overflowing with blood, betrayal, and heartbreak like Braveheart, Stephen of Ireland exploded onto the screen like pure madness, making audiences laugh one moment and feel uneasy the next. In 1995, David O'Hara was 30 years old when he transformed into the strangest warrior in William Wallace's army. With tangled hair, wild eyes, and an unpredictable grin, Stephen entered the story like a lunatic who enjoyed killing and casually talked to God as if having a private conversation. But the deeper audiences followed him. The clearer it became that behind the madness stood a warrior fiercely loyal to Wallace. During the brutal battles, Stephen was always among the first to charge forward, fighting as though his own life meant nothing. That chaotic, instinct-driven energy made him one of the film's most beloved characters. David O'Hara delivered a completely different presence, turning Stephen into someone both terrifying and hilarious amid the darkness of Braveheart. After the movie, David appeared in major productions like The Departed and Harry Potter, but never fully reached superstar status. Off-screen, his life also became difficult at times. O'Hara openly admitted struggling with alcoholism for years, especially after career disappointments and the pressures of Hollywood. He repeatedly lost emotional control and nearly destroyed many of his personal relationships. Though he avoided serious criminal scandals, David confessed that there was a period when he lived in complete chaos and isolation because of alcohol. Yet that roughness also gave him a uniquely authentic screen presence. Now at age 61, David O'Hara still carries the same reckless stare as if Stephen of Ireland were still laughing wildly in the blood-soaked battlefields of Scotland. Number 9, Brian Cox as Argyle Wallace. Although he did not appear for very long in Braveheart, Argyle Wallace planted the most powerful weapon into William Wallace's soul, intelligence, and self-respect. In 1995, Brian Cox was 49 years old when he portrayed the uncle who raised Wallace after English soldiers murdered the boy's family. While Scotland drowned in hatred and violence, Argyle wanted young Wallace to learn languages, gain knowledge, and understand that true strength did not always come from a sword. Brian Cox brought a rare calmness to a film consumed by war. It was Argyle's teachings that eventually helped Wallace become a leader capable of inspiring an entire nation. Despite limited screen time, the character remained like a spiritual shadow following Wallace until the very end. After Braveheart, Brian Cox became one of Scotland's most successful actors with a career spanning decades, especially exploding once again through Succession. But unlike his commanding screen image, his real life was filled with hardship. Brian grew up in poverty after his father died and his mother suffered a severe mental breakdown. He struggled with depression for years during his youth and often used alcohol to escape career pressures. Brian also experienced a failed marriage before eventually remarrying and finding stability later in life. Known for his fiery temper, he frequently criticized Hollywood publicly and sparked controversy by attacking other actors in interviews. Yet that harsh honesty became part of what made Brian Cox such a fascinating artist. Now at age 80, he still carries the same commanding voice as Argyle Wallace, the man who quietly helped shape a Scottish legend. Number 10, Ian Bannen as Robert the Elder. In Braveheart, some villains ruled with swords and violence, while others were dangerous because of the cold manipulation they practiced in the shadows. Robert the Elder belonged to the second kind. In 1995, Ian Bannen was 67 years old when he portrayed the ambitious father of Robert the Bruce. With a body weakened by illness but a mind still consumed by calculation, Robert the Elder constantly pressured his son to betray Wallace in order to protect noble privilege. He represented the class of Scottish nobles willing to sell out their own country for power granted by England. Ian Bannen played the role with terrifying subtlety. He never needed to scream or become physically violent because a single stare could reveal the character's manipulative cruelty. Conversations between Robert the Elder and his son created suffocating tension, as though all of Scotland were trapped between greed and honor. After Braveheart, Ian Bannen did not spend much more time on screen. He was already a respected veteran actor, an Academy Award nominee known for the classic style of British cinema. Yet his real life carried deep loneliness. Ian remained highly private but reportedly suffered heavily under decades of professional pressure. He went through severe emotional struggles and became known as a difficult personality on set. In 1999, Ian Bannen died at age 71 after a tragic car accident near Loch Ness, Scotland. His death shocked many colleagues because only a few years earlier, he had still appeared so commanding in Braveheart. Even today, Robert the Elder remains the image of a father so consumed by power that he ultimately lost his soul, a tragic ending for both the character and the actor behind him. More than 3 decades later, Braveheart remains more than just a film about war and freedom. It has become a cinematic memory tied to youth, glory, and the real-life tragedies of the actors who brought the legend to life. Many have grown old, many have passed away. But the legend of Scotland still lives forever.